But I want to ask you for just a moment, what could you have done more efficiently to prepare for this most festive of holidays? Did you lament, if I had only planned better, made my list earlier, sent things sooner, if I had just gotten moving, these remembrances to people I love would have been there in plenty of time? I just want you to know that I got a Christmas card from a former member of the church yesterday. Every year we discover that Christmas with music and children and Christ stories is a wonderful season. But it takes a strategy of discipline, a plan of action, an approach, and a tactic of getting moving to fully embrace the Christmas season, doesn't it? I would invite you to add, if you think that I'm making that up, I would ask you to ask the parents of Josephina and Rusty and Hattie. Ask them. Christmas takes a little planning, I bet, doesn't it? Just a smidge. The wise men seemed to be people of planning and discipline and movement, didn't they? The scripture doesn't tell us exactly what their profession was. We don't know if they were really kings, or if they were scientists, or astrologers, or philosophers in the palace of the king. We don't know if they traveled with a great retinue of women and men in attendance as servers and consultants, or if they were just 3 people alone. But we do know this. As wise people always are, they were deeply methodical students. Students of the world and students of the stars, when they observed the unusual phenomena occurring in the heavens, those minds that had devoted their lives to learning told them that the world was making a seismic shift in terms of human relationships with the Almighty. This shift, the wise ones apprehended, was so enormous that their scholarship was not to be marginalized by their religion. This movement in the sky was seen and felt outside of whatever religion the Magi might have practiced, and it would be seen and felt outside of religion the way that Israel and Judah practiced it. Perhaps the wise men had a copy of the prophecy of Micah, who foretold, "Though you are small, Bethlehem, out of you will come a king who will rule in Israel, whose lineage is of ancient days." Perhaps the wise men had a copy of the prophecy of Isaiah, who foretold the future as if it had already happened when he proclaimed, "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light, and on those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned." Yes, when the wise men saw the star, they realized that philosophical conjecture was turning into incarnational reality. Rather than sitting at home waiting for someone or waiting for something to happen, or for somebody else to confirm or disprove their observations, like those of you who understand the value of detailed scheduling and planning, those magi got busy moving. They sprang into action. The wise men set out on a journey to understand and test their hypothesis that God was moving in a miraculous way. The star had given them general direction, but when they got to Jerusalem, the star seemed to disappear, and so they went to the king wanting more specific instruction. Now, I can imagine that if this important sign, this marvelous star, was revealed to those of another discipline, perhaps another race and religion, the wise men came into the palace in Jerusalem just sure that he who sat on the throne of Jerusalem would be very aware of heaven's movement. Well, the wise men's question called forth another seismic shift. A seismic shift in Herod. The scripture says when Herod heard the news, Herod was frightened and all of Jerusalem with him. Herod had no interest in stars or moving to uncover change. Many believe that Herod, originally a Roman soldier, might have converted to Judaism in order to win the favor of the Hebrew people. In any case, he was what historians call a client king. The Romans appointed him king of Judah. He could do anything he wanted as long as he kept order and collected taxes for the Roman government. Oh, but you see, Herod had a dark side. Historians say he had secret police that constantly moved through the crowds monitoring people's opinion of him. If people disagreed with Herod, people died. Herod ruled by fear. The people were petrified of him. If Herod wasn't happy, nobody was happy. If Herod was frightened, all Jerusalem was frightened at what unreasonable, unbalanced, paranoid, megalomaniacal Herod would do. When the wise men came in inquiring about the birth of the new baby king, Herod called a secret meeting among his top advisors and his scribes to inquire if such a thing was true. The scribes opened their dusty scrolls that they didn't pay too much attention to anymore because they were a conquered nation. They did some quick reading and said, "Oh yes, the ancient texts predict that such a baby will be born nearby in Bethlehem of Judah." Well, Herod was beside himself. And when he could at last calm himself, he recalled the wise men and he said, "Find out the exact location of the baby and let me know where he is, so that I may come and worship him." Meanwhile, as you know, Herod devised a deadly plan. And so the wise men set out again, and the star reappeared, leading them, as the scribes had said, straight to where Jesus was. The wise men presented the babe their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and they paid the little king homage. But the wise men had to have known that Herod was a fraud. Who would say to any intelligent person, let alone a scholar, "Find out where this little king, my successor, is located so that I may come and worship the very one who prophets say is born to take away my crown"? The difference between the wise men and Herod is that in a world that was teeming with change, as the world always has been, Herod spent all of his time trying to milk the system and get things the same, and keep things the same, keep an already downtrodden people hopeless. His advisors and scribes had the predictions about the baby, but a king of Israel born in little nearby outskirt village Bethlehem? Who had time to consider such a prophecy and vision when every day they were constantly dealing with Herod's irrational and dangerous behavior? He was always saying and doing something illogical. That's what scared them. That's what occupied their time. But oh, when international guests show up claiming that they have signs shown in the heavens that God's prophecy that you chose to ignore was this very instant come true, Herod was pressed into reactionary, fear-driven response. But the wise men, their curiosity piqued and disciplined by long study, like Simeon and Anna, who we talked about last week, had eyes trained to see an irregularity and abnormality in the heavens. As they left Herod with the star's reappearance, God led them directly to the outskirts of society, where a little king who was the physical manifestation of hope, peace, joy, and love was born. The wise men's actions were proactive. Their actions facilitated God's revealing God's self. Their actions spoke of interreligious concord and synchronization. Herod's killing all the male children in an attempt to get to Jesus was reactionary. It was last minute, and it was extremely cruel. So often modern society laments, if criminals use the same energy and imagination doing something proactive that they use to hurt and destroy, what an amazing brain trust the world would have. But as we see played out every day, fear, paranoia, and self-loathing will never facilitate peace for humankind. The wise men were daring. Herod was consumed with dread and fright. The wise men saw God moving outside of their faith discipline, outside of their culture, to perhaps embrace the world. Herod killed in an attempt to keep the world the same. There are parts of this life that you and I would love to keep the same. business dealings we wish we could do over, things we wish we had not said in anger or in gossip, loved ones we would like to have back in this life, alive and healthy. God's wisdom reminds us that fully embracing life is to understand that nothing living stays the same. Christ's birth, life, and conquering of death inspires us to be confronted and then comforted. And even as we travel across our own deserts in search of salvation, to rejoice in the knowledge that the plan of life is that nothing living stays the same. We, like the wise men, are called to constantly move in search of deeper meaning. As we continue to follow God into the future, in what ways are you and I called to take proactive action? What can you and I do with the time that we have that will allow us to go with God's plan? Whom can we invite to sail through oceans, climb over mountains, or traverse across deserts to be a part of this all-inclusive God community? Perhaps a beginning point in our invitation is to do some deep work, changing how we think about challenge and change. Little White Chapel is an intimate congregation, but there is activity here. We have a choir that sings beautifully. We have a women's group that meets every month. There is a 5 p.m. Saturday band. There is a group that puts up and hopefully will take down all of these decorations. There are people working together every time there is a social event, just ask Sharon Ferry. There are people who flyer the neighborhood inviting people in. There are people that you don't know who show up at open mic nights. Rather than thinking that showing up to these events is another drain on your precious time, and it is a drain on your time, understand that every time you show up, visitors walking in looking for a place to plug in, a place to get busy, a place to worship, when they walk in and see you here, they see a place that has that much more vitality measured by the fact that you showed up. Your welcome, your enticement. That is a testimony to inclusion just by your very presence. You are as important as anything that takes place in the front of the chancel or on the stage of the social hall. Like the Magi, we are called to move through time. We are called to become lifelong students. We are called to study and understand how our presence is a gift from God to those who are searching, and then study to understand how we can organize our time to get moving and to keep the assembling of ourselves in God's presence, keep that at the top of our list rather than as something I'll do if I feel like it. We are called to keep joyfully moving with this assurance. God's star will guide us. Let's pray. Oh God, sometimes at the end of a holiday season seems so beat up, we just want a couple days to take off, maybe a week. Maybe the phone won't ring. Maybe the bills won't come quite so soon. Maybe nobody will get sick. Maybe nobody will die. But the easy yoke that you promised us, the light burden that you offer to us, is filled with things that we are called to do to be part of your faith community. As never before, give us ears to listen, eyes to see, hands to touch, and a heart to feel those around us, so that we will continue to be students of your will and always be caught and accused of going where you lead us. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.